Welcome, souls seeking peace, to the first episode of Unlocking Inner Peace. And I'm delighted to accompany everyone on this journey to discover the secrets that help make our lives lighter and more meaningful. Perhaps, within us, everyone wishes for a life painted entirely in rosy hues, right? A life where everything goes smoothly, joy follows joy, with no worries, no sorrows. But if we're truly honest with ourselves, you'll find that real life isn't quite like that. Alongside the brilliant moments, there are always low notes, things that don't go as planned, uncomfortable feelings that we, whether we like it or not, have to face. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I feel this way? Why aren't things going my way? Is there any way to reduce these negative feelings? If you've had such concerns, then today's podcast episode is for you. In this first episode, we won't rush to find magical solutions. Instead, we'll do something incredibly important together, a foundational step that, if overlooked, all subsequent efforts to find peace might just be like building a house on sand. That is, to look directly at and understand the unavoidable low notes in the symphony of life. Sounds a bit gloomy, doesn't it? But trust me, bravely facing and clearly understanding these not-so-pleasant aspects is precisely the first key to opening the door to true peace. Like a doctor, before prescribing medicine, they must correctly diagnose the illness. We are the same. If we want to find serenity, we first need to clearly understand what is making us uneasy. So, are you ready to unveil the mystery with me, to explore these very human low notes? Find a truly comfortable space, take a deep breath, and let's begin this meaningful journey together. Part 1. The obvious low notes, when life clearly doesn't go our way. First, let's go over the low notes that perhaps everyone among us has felt at least once or witnessed in life. They are very clear, very specific, and often bring unpleasant feelings. I'll temporarily call these the obvious low notes, the not-so-easy beginning, associated with birth. It might sound strange, because birth is a joy, a momentous event. But if we look a little closer, right from the beginning of this journey, there were low notes. For the mother, 9 months and 10 days of carrying a heavy burden, that's an entire challenging journey. There are mornings waking up with persistent nausea, feeling exhausted from bodily changes. A friend of mine recounted that during her first trimester, she could barely eat anything, lost several kilograms, and was always in a low battery state. Then her body changed, becoming heavier, with back pain and insomnia. When it came to giving birth, those were pains that perhaps only mothers can fully comprehend, sometimes lasting for tens of hours, completely draining both physical and mental strength. Although the happiness of welcoming a beloved child is immense, it cannot be denied that the journey of motherhood, right from the start, involves great sacrifice and endurance. For the baby, from a warm, safe environment in the mother's womb, suddenly stepping out into a completely unfamiliar world. The light is brighter, sounds are louder, the temperature is different. The first cry, from a certain perspective, could also be a reaction to these new and somewhat uncomfortable sensations. A neighbor's baby, just a few weeks old, cried inconsolably every night. The baby's mother said, perhaps the child wasn't used to it yet, was still scared, still had to get used to breastfeeding, to digestion. All are challenges of early life. The burden of time and the changes of old age associated with aging. Time passes, and none of us can hold on to youth forever. Old age comes, bringing changes not only in appearance, but also in health and spirit. Declining health. This is perhaps the most noticeable. An elderly man in my neighborhood, once famous as the strongest in the area, could do heavy work alone. Yet now, just past 70, he has to stop and gasp for breath after climbing a few stairs. His knee joints ache whenever the weather changes, his eyes have dimmed, and he has to use a magnifying glass to read the newspaper. He often sighs. Only now do I truly understand the saying, health is more precious than gold. I want to do this and that for my children and grandchildren, but I lack the strength. Memory no longer sharp. An elderly woman at the end of our alley, once very agile and lively. Now, she often forgets things. Sometimes she puts something away and then searches the whole house for it. She tells us stories from the past, but the story repeats itself, or sometimes she forgets what she was about to say mid-sentence. This sometimes makes her feel sad and helpless. Changes in appearance and the feeling of being forgotten. A former teacher of mine, a very charming and life-loving woman. Meeting her again recently, she confided that sometimes she feels disheartened when she looks in the mirror and sees more wrinkles, her hair noticeably grayer. She feels less confident than before, and sometimes feels she is no longer as useful as when she was teaching, loved by her students. For many, accepting age-related changes in appearance is also a significant low note. Loneliness as children and grandchildren grow up. When children grow up, have their own families, their own jobs, the time spent with parents diminishes. Many elderly people feel lonely in their own homes. They miss the laughter of their children and grandchildren, miss family meals. Friends of the same age also gradually become fewer. The loneliness of old age is also an unavoidable experience. Physical and mental pain during sickness and illness. Health is everything. The more one reflects on this, the truer it seems. Because when illness strikes, it not only brings physical pain, but also a myriad of other consequences. Common everyday ailments. Just a common cold or a viral fever is enough to make us tired and weak. A splitting headache, a high fever, a sore throat, no appetite for anything. Work is disrupted, leisure plans have to be canceled. Those few days spent bedridden, you realize how precious healthy days are. Serious illnesses. More frightening are critical illnesses like cancer, heart disease, stroke. A neighbor of mine, a healthy man, the pillar of his family, suddenly discovered he had a terminal illness in its final stage. His whole family was devastated. He not only had to endure the pain of the illness, the side effects of treatment, but also the constant worry about expenses, about the future of his wife and children if one day he was no longer there. The look in his eyes during those days contained pain, fear, and helplessness. Chronic diseases that linger. Some people have to live with illness for their entire lives, like diabetes, arthritis, asthma. A former colleague of mine has had a chronic illness since she was very young. Every day she has to take medicine, has to be careful with her diet. Although she always tries to appear optimistic, I know there are times when she also feels tired, wishing for a day to live comfortably, without worrying about her health, without having to watch every meal. Her quality of life is somewhat affected. Permanent separation and the fear of the end, associated with death. This is perhaps the biggest, most frightening low note that everyone must face, sooner or later. Losing a loved one. The feeling when a loved one suddenly or gradually leaves us forever, it's incredibly painful and hollow. The day a relative in my family passed away, I felt like my whole world had collapsed. Their image, gentle voice, favorite dishes, words of advice, all became mere memories. That pain, even as time passes, still occasionally stings my heart. Fear of one's own death. Though rarely spoken aloud, perhaps everyone among us has fleetingly thought about our own end. Worrying about unfinished business, unfulfilled dreams, worrying about how loved ones will fare when we are gone. A close friend of mine, after a serious accident from which he luckily escaped death, became much more pensive. He said, in that moment facing the line between life and death, he realized how much he loved this life, and how many things he still wanted to do. Witnessing the passing of others. Every time we hear news of a friend, a colleague, or even a celebrity we admire passing away, we are once again reminded of the fragility, the uncertainty of human existence. It makes us rethink the true values in life. Ever-present negative emotional states. Besides those major events, our daily lives are not lacking in emotional low notes. Sadness, sorrow, when failing an important exam, when rejected for a job opportunity, when a passion project fails, when breaking up from a relationship. Feelings of sadness, dejection, disappointment are unavoidable. A cousin of mine studied diligently for a whole year for her dream university entrance exam, but the results were not as expected. She cried a lot, feeling all her efforts were wasted. For several weeks, she just holed up in her room, not wanting to see anyone. Heartache, anguish, in a negative, suffering-inducing way when witnessing a loved one suffer from pain, illness, and feeling helpless to do anything more. When my mother was hospitalized for a long time due to a serious illness, every time I saw her wince in pain, I felt my heart clench. I wished I could bear that pain for her. Or when watching news about natural disasters, wars, seeing people lose their homes, their loved ones, my heart also swells with a sense of sorrow and compassion. Pain, both physical and mental, a fall from a bike, causing scraped limbs, aching all over. An unintentional word from someone deeply hurting you. Being misunderstood by friends, betrayed by someone you trusted. Mental pain is sometimes more persistent and harder to heal than physical pain. A friend of mine was once devastated when she discovered her boyfriend had cheated on her. She said it felt like her whole world had collapsed. Her trust was shattered, and her heart ached so much she couldn't breathe. Worry, anxiety, worrying about career prospects, financial burdens, children's education, elderly parents in the countryside. Hundreds of worries can besiege us every day. A young woman about to graduate from university was always in a state of tension. She worried about whether she could find a job in her field, worried about competitive pressure, worried she wouldn't be capable enough to meet employers' requirements. Long, sleepless nights due to worry had become familiar to her. Part 2. Fleeting joy. The fragile beauty and regret when good things fade. Besides the obvious low notes we just went over, there's another kind of unsatisfactoriness that is more subtle, often hidden behind things that seem good. It's when the joys, the happiness we attain, don't last forever. They come and go, shine brightly, then fade, leaving in our hearts a bit of regret, a sense of emptiness. I call this fleeting joy. The fragile beauty and regret when good things fade. All happiness will eventually change form or fade. The dream vacation, you eagerly plan a trip far away to a new, unfamiliar land. The days there are wonderful. You explore beautiful sights, enjoy delicious food, experience new things. But then, every trip must end. Sitting on the plane back, looking at the photos you just took, you feel happy for the beautiful memories. But also a little sadness creeps in because the fun ends quickly. The euphoric, free feeling of those days gradually recedes, giving way to the whirlwind of daily work. You wish the trip could have lasted longer. The joy of owning a new item. You dream of having the latest smartphone, a designer handbag, or a fancy motorbike. You work hard, save money, and finally buy it. In the early days, you feel extremely happy, proud, caressing it constantly. But then, after a while, maybe a few weeks, a few months, that excitement diminishes. The item becomes something familiar, no longer bringing that special feeling it did when it was new. Then you start longing for something else, something newer. A lively party, a reunion, friends meet after a long time, endless stories, bursts of laughter. The atmosphere is truly joyful, warm. But then, every party comes to an end. People say goodbye and go home, leaving a slight feeling of emptiness, of lingering attachment. You look forward to the next fun gathering, but that moment has passed. Achieving an important goal. After so much effort, you finally get promoted, or complete a major project, or graduate from a difficult course. A surge of pride and satisfaction. But that joy, however great, doesn't stay forever with the same initial intensity. It subsides, becomes a beautiful milestone, and you have to continue facing new challenges, new goals. Good health is not permanent either. From peak performance, a friend of mine was once a very good athlete, winning many medals in his youth. His body was firm, flexible, full of energy. But now, in middle age, although he still tries to maintain his training, he admits that his endurance has decreased, his speed is not what it used to be, and occasionally aches and pains visit after a heavy workout. He says, "Looking back at old photos, I feel a little regretful. That time of youthful, invincible health, it passed so quickly." Recovery after illness. When you've just gone through an illness, even just a common cold, you feel incredibly grateful when you recover. You breathe fresh air, eat with appetite, move around briskly. You tell yourself you'll have to take better care of your health. But then daily life, with all its worries and pressures, sweeps you away, and sometimes you become neglectful again. Until a sign of fatigue or a slight headache appears, you're startled into realizing, that wonderful feeling of being healthy is also so fragile. Close relationships also constantly change. Love, friendship, family ties, the most precious emotional bonds, are also not exempt from the law of change. Love from passionate to calm, or even fading. In the early stages of love, everything is beautiful, romantic. Two people always want to be together, texting all day, surprise gifts, sweet words. But over time, especially after marriage, having children, life becomes busier. Feelings can transform into another form, becoming more realistic, more responsible, sometimes even involving conflicts, quiet periods. The thrilling, infatuated feeling of the early days may no longer be constant. If not skillfully nurtured, love can even fade, crack. Close friendships can drift apart over time. A close friend and I were inseparable since our school days. We shared every secret, understood each other with just a glance. But after graduating from university, she went to study abroad, then got married and settled overseas. Although we still try to keep in touch via social media, the geographical distance, time zone differences, and each person's own worries mean we can no longer talk for hours like before. Every time I look at old photos, I still feel warm, but also a little wistful because the passionate friendship of those days has now undergone changes. Children grow up and leave the parents' embrace. A neighboring couple has two sons who are both grown up, married, and live in another city. Every holiday when the children and grandchildren visit, the house is bustling and filled with laughter. But when the children leave, the house returns to silence, and the longing for them wells up in the elderly couple's hearts. The wife often confides, when raising children, you hope they grow up, succeed, fly high and far. But when they truly fly away, parents' hearts feel empty, miss them dearly. We know it's the rule, but still wish the children and grandchildren were nearby. Success, fame, status are also only temporary. The things that the world often pursues like money, fame, status, they are not immutable. Ups and downs in career. An acquaintance was once a talented business director, respected by everyone, bringing in many large contracts for the company. But after the company faced difficulties and restructured, his department was dissolved. He had to accept a lower, less powerful position. Although he still tried to do his job well, he couldn't help but feel disheartened by this change. The halo of yesteryear seemed to have faded. The fleeting fame of public figures, the entertainment world, is a prime example. There are countless singers and actors who once created a storm, adored by millions of fans. But then, over time, as new talents emerge, as audience tastes change, they are gradually forgotten. The adulation, the stage lights, the lucrative advertising contracts, all can disappear. If one is not mentally prepared for that, the disappointment and feeling of being abandoned will be very heavy. You see, the unsatisfactoriness here doesn't lie in the joys, the good things themselves being bad. It lies in the fact that they don't last forever. They always change, always risk being lost. We, with our human instincts, tend to want to hold on, to cling to happy moments, to pleasant states. And when they are no longer as before, we feel sad, regretful, empty. If only this joy lasted forever. If only I could stay young and healthy like this forever. If only love were always as passionate as in the beginning. These desires are very human, but they are also the source of these subtle, low notes. Understanding that even the best things carry within them the seeds of change, of impermanence, helps us learn to cherish more what we have in the present moment, instead of suffering when they disappear or are no longer as we wish. It also helps us adjust our expectations of happiness, realizing that it is not a static, unchanging state, but a flow, a journey where we learn to find joy even in change. Part 3. The undercurrent. Hidden insecurity even when everything seems fine on the surface. We have journeyed together through the obvious low notes and the fragility of fleeting joy. Now, we will dive a little deeper to explore an even more subtle aspect of unsatisfactoriness. This is an undercurrent, a hidden feeling of unease, of dissatisfaction, that can exist even when our lives seem very fine on the surface, with no major upheavals. I call this the undercurrent, hidden insecurity even when everything seems fine on the surface. This is perhaps the most elusive aspect, because it's not a specific pain like illness, nor a clear loss like a breakup. It's like a soft whisper of dissatisfaction, a vague sense of something missing, a simmering tension that perhaps many of us have felt without being able to name. It stems from the very nature of constant change, the constant movement of all things, and from the way we often unconsciously cling to things that are inherently unstable. The invisible fatigue of having to be and maintaining an image. In life, we often wear many hats: a filial child, a good student, a dedicated employee, a reliable friend, a model parent, an ideal spouse. The effort to fulfill these roles well, to meet expectations, both our own and those of others, of society, sometimes brings an invisible pressure, a constant tension. Example of perfection pressure: a woman was very successful, had a happy family, and well-behaved children. Outwardly, everyone admired her life. But she shared that she always felt pressure to maintain that perfect image. She was afraid of making mistakes, afraid of disappointing others, afraid of no longer being admired. Even when everything was going very well, she still had a vague fear that she wouldn't be able to maintain this perfection forever. The straining to meet expectations, even if no one forced her, is also a form of hidden insecurity. Example of maintaining an image on social media. A young person built a very cool and successful image on social media. Luxurious travels, meals at expensive restaurants, designer items, profound philosophical statuses. But few knew that to get those virtual photos, that person had to calculate very carefully, sometimes borrow money, or work extremely hard to afford it. That person admitted to sometimes feeling exhausted from having to act to match the image they had created. The fear of being exposed, the fear of no longer getting likes or hearts, created an underlying tension. Insidious insecurity from life's inherent uncertainty. Even if you have a stable job, a peaceful family, good health, deep down, have you ever felt a little insecure, a little afraid that these good things could change at any moment? Example of worrying about the future despite present stability. A man has a good position in a large company with a decent income. But every time he reads news about difficult economic situations, companies laying off staff massively, he can't help but feel a bit anxious. Will my company survive? Will my job be affected? Although everything is still very stable at present, the thought, nothing is certain, occasionally creeps into his mind, causing a slight tension. Example of worrying about loved ones despite their current health. My parents are now over 60. Although they are still healthy and lucid, every time I hear news of an acquaintance in the neighborhood suddenly having a stroke or contracting a serious illness, I can't help but worry about my parents. I'm afraid that one day, misfortune might also befall them. The feeling of helplessness before the law of birth, aging, sickness, and death, though I don't want to think about it, still exists somewhere, like an undercurrent. The incompleteness when clinging to a fragile self and its constituent elements. This is perhaps the deepest root of this undercurrent. According to wise masters, we humans are not fixed, unchanging entities. Instead, we are a combination of many ever-changing elements, like a constantly flowing river. Try to imagine these aspects of yourself. This body, our physical form, it changes every second, every minute. Your hair grows longer, your fingernails grow, old cells in your body die, and new cells are born. Today you feel full of energy. Tomorrow you might feel a bit tired, lethargic. You look in the mirror and see yourself looking fresh today, but there are also days when you see yourself looking pale, lacking vitality. Clinging and the hidden low note. A woman was very proud of her slender figure and smooth skin from her youth. She spent a lot of time and money exercising, caring for herself, trying to hold on to her youthfulness. But when she entered middle age, no matter how hard she tried, signs of time like wrinkles, crow's feet, or a little belly fat still appeared. Every time she discovered a new flaw, she felt sad, anxious, even scared. She identified her value with that youthful beauty. When her appearance changed, she felt like an important part of her was being lost. This insecurity was always simmering, even when she still received compliments from others. Or a young man very proud of his bulging muscles. When injured and having to stop training for a while, his muscles somewhat diminished, he felt insecure, uncomfortable, and was always eager to return to the gym to find himself again. Feelings that come and go, emotions of joy, sadness, liking, disliking, or a state of indifference. In one day, you experienced so many emotional states. Happy when hearing good news, sad when encountering misfortune, pleased when eating delicious food, annoyed when disturbed by someone, or times when you feel nothing special, just a neutral state. All these feelings, they come and go, none stay with you forever. Clinging and the hidden low note. A person really liked the feeling of being recognized, of being praised. Every time he completed a task well and was praised by his boss in front of everyone, he felt extremely happy, euphoric. He always strived his best to achieve those praises. But precisely because he was so addicted to this pleasant feeling, when he wasn't recognized, or worse, was criticized, he felt extremely disappointed, dejected, even angry. He was stuck in pursuing pleasant feelings and avoiding unpleasant ones. This created constant tension because no one can guarantee they will always be praised and never criticized. Or there are people addicted to shopping. Only when they successfully check out do they feel happy, satisfied. But that joy passes very quickly, and they have to continue searching for the next item to fill the emotional void. How we perceive, imagine, and label things, our notions, concepts, imagination. When you meet a stranger, based on their appearance, way of speaking, you might imagine in your head, this person seems friendly, or this person looks unapproachable. When you hear a piece of news, you might draw a whole story around it in your head. These labels, concepts, inferences are also not fixed. They change depending on new information you receive, your mood at the time, or your past experiences. Clinging and the hidden low note. Another woman, after a few failed relationships, had labeled herself as someone unlucky in love, ill-fated in romance. Every time a new person tried to get to know her, she would bring out that label to view them through. If the other person did even a small thing not to her liking, she would immediately think, I knew it. It's going to fail again. She was stuck in that notion, that negative image of herself and relationships, making it difficult for her to open her heart and truly experience love fully. The insecurity of failing again was always present in her mind. Or there are people who always think life is unfair, and they always find evidence to reinforce that belief, making them always feel dissatisfied, even when good things happen. The currents of thoughts, habits, intentions, and underlying psychological reactions, our inner motivations, urges, behavioral patterns. These are more subtle energy flows within us, forming our personality, ingrained habits, hard-to-shed prejudices, sudden intentions, or automatic emotional reactions. For example, the habit of scrolling through your phone as soon as you wake up in the morning, the intention to help someone in difficulty on the street, or the reaction of flaring up in anger when interrupted. These flows are also formed from past experiences, past conditioning, and they can also change if we consciously practice. Clinging and the hidden low note. A man had a habit of procrastinating. He knew it wasn't good, it affected his performance and caused many problems. But every time he had a task to complete, thoughts like, I'll do it tomorrow, this is too hard. What do I do now? I need more inspiration. Part 4. Why is welcoming and understanding these low notes so crucially important? The first stepping stone to true peace. So far, we've dissected quite a bit about the low notes in life, from the very obvious, easily seen, to the more subtle undercurrents. Some of you might feel, oh, why does this sound so negative and heavy? This is unlocking inner peace. Why talk so much about unhappy things? I completely understand how you feel, but please believe me, the purpose of us looking directly at these low notes together is not to make us pessimistic, cynical, or discouraged. Quite the opposite. Bravely facing, identifying, and understanding these not-so-pleasant aspects of life is precisely the first step, the indispensable foundation for us to find peace and happiness in a more realistic and sustainable way. It's like when you want to clean a messy room. First, you have to turn on the lights, see every nook and cranny clearly, see where the trash is, where things are misplaced, and only then can you start cleaning, right? So, specifically, what benefits does welcoming and understanding these low notes bring us? Ending the chase for illusions, learning to accept reality, the solid foundation of calmness. When we are not taught, or do not realize on our own, that life inherently has ups and downs, that there are things beyond our control, we very easily nurture unrealistic expectations. We might unconsciously expect everything to always go our way, that love must always be rosy and romantic like in the movies, that careers must always advance rapidly, and health must always be abundant, never falling ill. This is a dangerous trap of toxic positivity if it causes us to deny or avoid reality. Real-life example. A young woman was sheltered by her family since childhood, accustomed to having all her requests met. When she graduated and started working, facing difficulties for the first time, like a demanding boss, uncooperative colleagues, or a failed project, she felt extremely shocked and devastated. She constantly asked herself, "Why am I so unlucky? Why is life so unfair to me?" Because before, she had never been mentally prepared that failure, difficulties, and unsatisfactory things are an inevitable part of the journey of growth. Or another example, a newly married couple imagined married life would always be filled with laughter and romance like their early dating days. But when faced with very mundane clashes like who will do the dishes, how to manage joint finances reasonably, or each other's different living habits, they felt disappointed, annoyed, and frequently argued. If they understood that marriage also has low notes, challenges that require both to be patient, understanding, and make efforts to overcome, perhaps they would be calmer to face and resolve problems constructively. Understanding these low notes helps us land safely on the ground of reality. From there, we can begin to build peace from what we currently have, instead of tirelessly chasing distant illusions or drowning in disappointment when reality doesn't match our dreams. Reducing useless resistance and a resentful attitude towards life. Opening up to accept the truth. When unwanted things happen, the instinctive reaction for many of us is to resist it, try to deny it, or find someone or something to blame. We often ask ourselves, "Why me? If only this hadn't happened. If it weren't for person A, for circumstance B, I wouldn't be in this mess." This resistance, though very human, doesn't change the situation that has already occurred. On the contrary, it only makes us more tired, consumes energy uselessly, and prolongs the feeling of discomfort and suffering. Real-life example. A man lost his job due to company difficulties and restructuring. Initially, he felt extremely angry, shocked, and constantly blamed the company for treating him unfairly, blamed his boss for not keeping his promise. He spent many days just complaining and whining to friends, immersed in the feeling of being a victim. But after some time, when he had calmed down a bit, and accepted that this was an event that had happened and could not be changed, he began to focus his energy on finding new opportunities. He updated his resume, reconnected with old contacts, and researched courses to improve his skills. That acceptance didn't mean he agreed with what the company did, but it helped free him from negative emotions so he could move forward more proactively. Or the case of a woman. When she discovered she had a chronic illness requiring long-term treatment, she initially felt very devastated and didn't want to accept that harsh truth. She went to many different hospitals, with the faint hope that there might be some diagnostic error. But when she understood that resistance only made her suffer more and become more tired, she began to learn to face it. She researched her illness thoroughly, learned to adjust her lifestyle accordingly, strictly adhered to the doctor's treatment plan, and sought support from family and friends. Although the illness was still there, her mindset was completely different. She became calmer, stronger, and even found joy in small, everyday things. Acceptance here doesn't mean surrendering or giving up negatively. It means acknowledging reality as it is, so that we can find the most appropriate and effective way to respond. It's like a sailor at sea. They cannot stop the rough waves, but they can learn to steer their boat to ride those waves safely, motivating us to actively seek real solutions, the path of growth and transformation. It's very obvious that if we don't realize we have a problem, or don't clearly understand the nature of that problem, we will never have the motivation to actively find a solution. Our brave act of looking directly at the low notes in our lives, analyzing them, understanding them, is the initial and crucial diagnosis. Only when the illness is correctly diagnosed can we find the appropriate medicine to treat it, or at least find the best way to live peacefully with it. Real-life example: a young friend, for a long time, often felt stressed, had trouble sleeping, a racing heart, and was easily irritable for no reason. Initially, this friend simply thought it was due to a busy work schedule and pressure. It wasn't until a relative shared the importance of mental health care and suggested the friend learn more that the friend began to read books, search for information online, and realize they were showing signs of psychological overload. From diagnosing their problem, the friend proactively sought a psychologist for counseling, learned relaxation techniques, and adjusted their lifestyle and work. Gradually, the friend's condition improved significantly. If the friend hadn't been willing to look at their problem seriously, they might have remained stuck in that cycle of stress and anxiety. Or another example: a family often had arguments and conflicts. Initially, both husband and wife thought the fault lay with the other for not understanding them, for not being willing to change. But after a frank and sincere conversation, prompted by a close friend, they looked at the problem together. They realized that the root of the conflicts was not just disagreements, but also that both lacked listening skills, open sharing, and had unrealistic expectations of each other. From diagnosing these deeper causes, they began to learn how to communicate more effectively, spend more quality time together, and try to understand each other better. Gradually, their relationship improved and became more harmonious. This is precisely the strong motivation for us to constantly learn, to constantly seek tools, methods, golden keys, which we will explore in more detail in subsequent podcast episodes of this Unlocking Inner Peace series, to help ourselves become better, stronger, and more peaceful amidst life's constant changes. Nurturing compassion for ourselves and others. We are not alone on this journey. When we only focus on our own difficulties, our own suffering, we very easily feel like the unhappiest person in the world, feel lonely, sorry for ourselves, and abandoned. But when we open our hearts, look more broadly, and understand that, everyone has their own low notes. Everyone has burdens, unspoken sorrows. We will look at others with more tolerance, empathy, and less judgment. Real-life example: a woman used to feel very annoyed and often complained about a colleague in her company because he often seemed irritable and unapproachable. But after coincidentally learning that the colleague was single-handedly shouldering the family's finances, plus caring for an elderly, seriously ill mother, the woman no longer felt annoyed or uncomfortable with him. Instead, a sense of understanding and a desire to share welled up in her. She proactively asked after him more often, occasionally helped him with small tasks at work when she could. And surprisingly, their relationship became much better and closer. Or in a support group for people who have experienced the loss of a loved one. When people bravely share their stories, their pain, their tears, they realize they are not the only ones in the world who have to endure such loss. They find empathy, understanding, and comfort from others in similar situations. This special connection brings immense spiritual strength, helping them gradually overcome difficult times. This compassion is not only directed outwards towards others, but it also turns inwards, towards ourselves. When we stumble, when we make mistakes, when we feel weak, we will also treat ourselves more kindly, with less self-torment, less self-blame. Because we understand that it is a very human part of the experience of being human. We are not perfect, and that is perfectly okay. Helping us appreciate the simple, peaceful moments in the present more, finding joy in simple things. If we always consider happiness and joy as givens, as things we are entitled to, we will very easily overlook, not recognize, or not know how to appreciate the beautiful, simple moments happening around us every day. But when we understand that everything can change, that joy is also temporary and fragile, we will learn to live more fully in each present moment. Real-life example: a man, after a long battle with illness and a fortunate recovery, felt that everything around him became more precious than ever. Waking up one morning, breathing in the fresh air, seeing the bright sunshine, hearing the cheerful chirping of birds, all brought him profound joy and gratitude. A warm family meal, a pleasant conversation with friends, or simply being able to walk by himself in the park. All the things he might have considered normal before now became precious moments he deeply cherished. Or another woman, realizing that her time with her aging, frail parents was limited, she tried to arrange her work to visit them more often. She patiently listened to her parents tell old stories, did small chores around the house with them, took them for walks, or simply held her mother's wrinkled hand. Each of those moments became incredibly meaningful and sacred to her. She no longer procrastinated on phone calls to check in, no longer hesitated to say words of love to her parents, because she understood that nothing lasts forever, and these present moments are priceless gifts. This is precisely the important premise for us to practice dwelling in the present. One of the golden keys we will explore more deeply in this podcast series, to know how to find joy and peace in the simplest things in life, instead of chasing distant things in the future or wallowing in past regrets. In summary, dear friends, our welcoming and understanding the low notes of life is not a negative or pessimistic act. On the contrary, it is an act of courage, of honesty with ourselves, and of wisdom. It's like a gardener who wants a beautiful flower garden. First, they must identify and remove all the weeds. We are the same. If we want peace in our souls, we first need to bravely look directly at the weeds that are troubling our minds. This is just the beginning, a very important diagnostic step. In the upcoming podcast episodes of Unlocking Inner Peace, we will explore more deeply the hidden causes behind these low notes, and most importantly, learn about the remedies, the paths, the specific golden keys to gradually transform them, to find true joy right in this ever-changing life. Thank you for spending your precious time listening and contemplating with Unlocking Inner Peace on a very real, very human aspect of life in this first episode. I hope that today's sharing, though it may have occasionally touched upon the low notes in your heart, will help you gain a new, deeper, and more useful perspective on your journey to find peace. Remember, recognizing difficulties, unsatisfactory things is not for us to stop there and feel helpless. Instead, it is to give us stronger motivation, more clarity to seek light, to seek positive solutions. If you find this content valuable and meaningful, please don't hesitate to share this podcast episode with your friends and family, those whom you think might also need these sharings. And of course, please subscribe to the Unlocking Inner Peace channel so you don't miss the next episodes, which promise to be even more interesting and beneficial. Your support and companionship are the greatest source of motivation for me to continue this podcast series. Wishing you all a day full of energy, much joy, and that you find precious moments of peace amidst the flow of life. See you in the next podcast episode of Unlocking Inner Peace. Goodbye.